Hello, this is Alex0 with another tutorial, and this tutorial will teach you how to use the bullet physics in the Blender game engine. The physics are really quite interesting, and there was a demo right before this, demonstration of what the physics engine can do, and this is my scene. I built it, and so I'll show you how to make a rudimentary one of these using some hinges, soft bodies, dynamic objects, and rigid bodies. Sorry. Alright, so let's open up Blender and start a new scene. So let's see here. Let's just add a big plane. Just scale it up. Ooh, more scale. And then let's add a UV sphere with 16 segments and 16 rings. Keep the radius of 1. Now, when you're making games and stuff, you want to try to keep the poly count, or how many vertices you've got, as low as you can. That way it runs faster, because Blender doesn't have to calculate more things. Alright, so first we want to make this into a rigid body. That means it'll roll around. It won't just slide. And then, let's see here. Let's add a plane right here and kind of scale it that way. Hit Control A and apply it. It's just always best to do that. That generally only makes a difference with soft bodies, but anyway. And then we want to change this to a rigid body. I think. No, just a dynamic. Anyway. And then go over here and add a constraint, rigid body joint, put show pivot, and it should just be right at the center. That's what we want. But we want to go into edit mode and kind of off balance it a little bit, so when we start the image it will swing down. This should. Let's switch this back to a rigid body. That's what it means. And we're not. Hold on. Let me see here. Okay. Alright, so I don't really know why it didn't work or anything, so let's just add a cube up here. We're going to do this anyway. Add a cube, scale it down a little bit, and turn it into sorry. Change this to rigid body, and click on the bounds. It should automatically be box. And then if you start the game engine, you'll see that our hinge works, and it's dynamic and moves around. Now, on this hinge, see, this is a ball hinge. That means it rotates kind of like a ball and socket joint, but not quite. It's like this thing is just on a ball, and it just stays attached to the ball, but can move any direction. And we don't want it to do that. We only want it to move along the Z and X axis, I believe. But that's not really important. You just change it to a hinge, and that should fix our problem. And then, okay then, that didn't fix our problem. That means we have to rotate the constraint. This thing right here, actually it's a pivot, or a constraint or whatever. Then we have to rotate it a little bit. So let's see, we want to rotate it on the Z axis, out of the way. Rotate it -90. You see now it was faced up like this, now it's done like this. So let's try it now. You see, there it goes. And it disappeared because it only has one side. In the game engine, if something only has one side, the other side is invisible. So if you want it to have two sides, extrude it down a little bit, and then select everything and hit Control N to recalculate normals outside. That just, sometimes you find little black spots in your meshes, and especially if you're using the GLSL materials and in texture mode, then that can be a sign that you have some normals that are screwed up. So let's start the game engine now. You see, there it goes. Now you can see both sides of it, but for whatever reason it still it didn't hit the sphere. So let's see if we can fix that. Anyway, that's not exactly important. So actually, here's something else that's interesting. So you can change how much mass something has. And if you don't know what mass is, it's essentially how heavy it is. So like, if I wanted to change this up to 5, it would make the cube much heavier. Maybe you can't really see it, but see, the thing is still spinning because the cube was heavier. I think I know why it's not hitting our sphere. Let's hit the box and go to sphere, and you can check what your bounds look like by going to the physics button, I think. Anyway, it's that, and clicking on draw extra bounds, and you see, you can't really see it, but if I were to click, anyway, but it's got a sphere, so it's very close, which is good. Oops, I hate it when I do that. Alright, let's start the game engine, and see. Oh, dang it. Odd. Okay, let's see here. It's a rigid body. Let's try the radius a little bit. It's got a dotted line around it. That's the radius. Sometimes that helps. The game engine can be really finicky sometimes, especially when you're using physics, because you have to get things exactly right, and sometimes they just decide to jump all out of place and all sorts of stuff. So sometimes you just have to fiddle around with it for a little while, and then it generally works. Alright, let's go ahead and just erase the cube. Forget that. Let's add some dominoes. So let's add a cube, scale it down along the x-axis, then along the y-axis, and kind of move it up a little bit so that it's just right above our plane. Sorry. And then let's go ahead and change this to a rigid body. Yeah. And want bounds box. And now let's run the game engine. And of course, let's change this bounds to box. That might help. There we go. That's more like it. Okay. Yeah, sometimes things like that happen. Anyway, so you see, box fell down, thing rotated, and domino fell over. So let's make some more dominoes. Duplicate it by Shift D if you don't already know that, and then you're along the x-axis. And I generally like to, when I'm doing dominoes, have the circle of the constraint, bounds, radius thing right next to each other so that it might not conflict or something. So do that, and then right now. Yay. See? It's actually quite easy. Now, on to soft bodies. Soft bodies, they can sometimes get really finicky. Anyway, so let's see here. If we wanted to add a soft body, let's say I wanted to add one right here. Let's make it a, actually let's move it over here. Let's make it a monkey, just because. Alright, so to have soft bodies in the game engine, go over here, change it to a soft body. Duh. Now, there's some things you can do to make it look a little bit more like cloth. I always uncheck the bending const button, I don't know what it does, and check that. And it always helps. Anyway, so if we start the game engine, see? The head is now a soft body. It's very squishy, acting soft. Yeah. And you can fool around with the settings, like how stiff it is, what the friction is, and all sorts of stuff, but I'm not going to teach you how to do that in this tutorial. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, one more thing. Dynamic objects. Dynamic objects are a little bit different from rigid objects in that they don't roll. They just slide. So say if I were to add a sphere, let's scale it down a little bit, and change this to dynamic. Sometimes dynamic is better, and other times it's not. So then, if you were to start the game engine, this thing would come down, hit that, and then it didn't roll, as you saw, it just slid. So that's what a dynamic object does. Personally, I like rigid objects or whatever, rigid bodies, but sometimes you can't use them, sometimes it gets all funky, but that doesn't happen very often. So there you go. If you have any questions, post a comment, message me on YouTube, and yeah.